$70 million. That's what Nayvadius Damon Wilburn, the world knows him as Future, made from selling his music catalog in 2022. $70 million in a single transaction. Add his touring income, his streaming royalties, his brand deals, his real estate investments, and you're looking at a man who's generated over $150 million in his career. But while Future bought a $20 million mansion, while he collected luxury cars like trophies, while he lived the life he rapped about, the people who stood beside him when he had nothing, his actual blood brother, his childhood friends, his day ones from the streets of Atlanta, they were still trapped in the same cycle that almost consumed him. Still hustling, still risking everything. Some of them facing federal charges, one of them dead, another facing life in prison for being caught with 21 kilograms of fentanyl. This isn't a hate piece. This isn't about tearing down Future's success. This is about asking the uncomfortable question that nobody in hip-hop wants to address. When you make hundreds of millions from the streets that raised you, do you owe anything to the people you left behind? Stay with me through this investigation, because what you're about to discover will change how you see success, loyalty, and the cost of making it out. By the end, you'll understand why Future's story isn't just about one rapper's fortune. It's about the choice between bringing people with you or leaving them in the trap. And that choice has consequences that echo through courtrooms, prison cells, and families destroyed by decisions that could have been different. Aerial shots of luxury mansions in Atlanta, Buckhead neighborhood, private jets on tarmacs, stacks of cash in music videos, cut to grainy footage of housing projects, corner stores with bars on the windows, police lights flashing, a different Atlanta. Two worlds existing in the same city, separated by choices, by luck, by opportunity. He rose from the hood. He made tens of millions. He sold his catalog for $70 million. Yet the ones who stood by him, they're still grinding, still risking everything, still trapped in a cycle that claims lives, destroys families, and perpetuates itself across generations. This is the truth behind the money, and the truth is far more complicated than Instagram posts and music videos would have you believe. The story begins in Zone 6, Atlanta, Kirkwood neighborhood. The streets that raised Nayvadius Wilburn weren't gentle. They didn't make promises about bright futures or reward hard work with opportunity. They just gave you two stark options: find a way out or get consumed by the cycle that's claimed countless others before you. Future wasn't born into music royalty. There was no family dynasty opening doors, no industry connections greasing the wheels. His mother worked at a salon, cutting hair for working-class folks trying to maintain dignity on limited budgets. His extended family hustled to survive in an economy that offered few legitimate paths to prosperity. The neighborhood was Atlanta in the 2000s. A city in transformation, becoming a hip-hop capital and economic hub, but leaving behind the people who'd always called it home. The Kirkwood of Future's youth was a place where street economics dominated, where young men watched their fathers and older brothers navigate the impossible math of minimum wage jobs versus the immediate returns of trap economics, where the education system was underfunded and overcrowded, offering few realistic paths to college or professional careers, where the jobs available, fast food, retail, manual labor, paid wages that couldn't support a family or build a future. In this environment, the trap wasn't just attractive, it was logical. When you can work 40 hours at a legitimate job for $300 after taxes, or work 20 hours in the streets for $2,000 cash, the math becomes simple, even if the long-term consequences are catastrophic. Young Nayvadius started rapping in his teens, drawn to music as both expression and potential escape route. But success didn't come quick. This wasn't a fairy tale where talent was immediately recognized and rewarded. He grinded through Atlanta's underground scene for years, performing at clubs where the sound system barely worked and the crowd was more interested in drinking than listening. He made mixtapes that circulated locally but never caught fire regionally. He watched friends and family members get locked up or killed around him, each loss reinforcing the urgency of finding a way out. The turning point came in 2011, but even that required years of groundwork. Streets Calling was his fourth official mixtape, released after years of developing his sound, building relationships in Atlanta's music scene, and grinding through countless disappointments. The project caught attention because it represented something authentic. Future wasn't cosplaying as a street rapper, he was documenting life he'd actually lived and observed. Then, astronaut status pushed him further. The title itself was aspirational. Future reaching for something beyond the ground-level existence of street life, aiming for heights that seemed impossible from Kirkwood. He was developing his signature sound during this period, that melodic auto-tune delivery that would define not just his career but influence an entire generation of rappers who followed. But it was still underground, still regional, still uncertain whether this would lead anywhere beyond local respect. Then the moment that changed everything, Tony Montana in 2011. That song wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural earthquake. The beat hit different, hypnotic and menacing. The melody was infectious, worming into your brain and staying there. But what made it special was Future's delivery, the way he captured something hip-hop hadn't quite articulated before. The emotional complexity of street success, the pain that coexists with ambition, the trauma that doesn't disappear just because money appears. Tony Montana wasn't celebratory in the traditional sense. It acknowledged that getting money from the streets comes with costs, psychological, moral, social costs that don't show up on a balance sheet. Radio stations started playing it, clubs made it a staple. Other rappers started taking notice, realizing Future wasn't just another Atlanta artist trying to replicate what was already working. He was creating something new. The albums followed in rapid succession, each one building momentum. Pluto dropped in 2012, his official major label debut through Epic Records and Free Bands, his own imprint. It debuted at number 8 on the Billboard 200, selling 41,000 copies in its first week. For a debut album from an artist many people still didn't know nationally, that was strong. The streets had fully embraced Future, now the mainstream was catching up. Honest came in 2014, his sophomore album. This one showed artistic growth, more introspective, more willing to explore vulnerability alongside the street narratives. Songs about relationships, about fatherhood, about the complications of fame mixed with the trap stories that had built his reputation. It debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200 with 53,000 copies sold, proving Future wasn't a flash in the pan, but nothing prepared the industry for the run that would cement Future's legendary status. DS2, Dirty Sprite 2, dropped in July 2015, and from the first track, it was clear this was something special. Dark, hypnotic, uncompromising in its artistic vision. No attempts to make radio-friendly pop-rap crossover songs, just Future at his most authentic, creating music that felt like a transmission from the streets, unfiltered and raw. It debuted at number 1, selling 147,000 copies in its first week. Critics praised it as one of the year's best albums. Fans obsessed over it, making songs like March Madness into anthems. Just months later, Future and Drake dropped What a Time to Be Alive, a collaborative mixtape that felt like two titans at their peaks joining forces. Released in September 2015, it debuted at number 1, selling 375,000 equivalent units in its first week. The combination of Drake's global stardom and Future's street credibility created something that dominated both streaming platforms and traditional radio simultaneously. Future wasn't slowing down. If anything, he was accelerating. Evol dropped in February 2016, surprising fans with minimal promotion. It still debuted at number 1 with 134,000 units. Then came his most audacious move. In February 2017, Future released 2 albums on back-to-back weeks. Future dropped February 17th, debuting at number 1 with 140,000 units. 1 week later, February 24th, HNDRXX dropped, also debuting at number 1 with 121,000 units. Future became the first artist to debut 2 albums at number 1 on consecutive weeks, a feat that demonstrated his complete dominance of the hip-hop landscape. This wasn't just success, this was Future establishing himself as one of hip-hop's most consistent forces, an artist who could release music at will and count on it reaching the top of the charts. From 2015 to 2017, Future was arguably the hottest artist in hip-hop, certainly one of the most prolific, and undeniably one of the most influential. The numbers tell a story that goes beyond chart positions. Future has accumulated over 20 billion streams on Spotify alone, with similar massive numbers across Apple Music, YouTube, and other platforms. He's had 7 albums debut at number 1 on the Billboard 200. He sold millions of physical and digital albums during an era when album sales were declining industry-wide. He's had dozens of songs chart on the Billboard Hot 100, including multiple top 10 hits. His feature rate, the amount other artists pay to get Future on their song, reportedly reached $250,000 or more at his peak. That's not just validation of his artistic value. That's proof of his commercial impact. Artists don't pay that kind of money unless a future verse virtually guarantees additional streams, radio play, and cultural relevance. But the real money, the generational wealth money, came from understanding the business side that many artists ignore until it's too late. Future didn't just make hit songs and spend the money on jewelry and cars. He built a catalog. He negotiated to own his masters through his Freebands label, meaning he controlled the actual recordings and could profit from them in perpetuity. He controlled his publishing rights, owning the underlying compositions that generate royalties every time his songs are used. He structured his deals to maximize long-term value rather than taking the biggest possible upfront payment and giving away his rights. This business sophistication set up the transaction that would define his financial legacy. In 2022, Future made the move that transformed paper success into liquid, life-changing wealth. He sold his music catalog to Influence Media Partners for $70 million. Let's pause here and really break down what this means, because understanding catalog sales is essential to grasping both Future's wealth and the missed opportunities that followed. When you sell a music catalog, you're selling the rights to your songs, typically both the master recordings and the publishing rights. Think of it this way. Every time a Future song gets streamed on Spotify, played on radio, used in a commercial, featured in a movie, covered by another artist, or licensed for any purpose, money gets generated. Normally, that money would flow to Future as the owner of those rights. But when you sell the catalog, that future income now flows to whoever bought it. So why would an artist sell? Because you're trading uncertain future income for guaranteed immediate cash. Influence Media Partners hired analysts who studied Future's streaming numbers meticulously. His monthly listeners, his song play counts, his catalog's historical performance. They analyzed his chart history, his cultural relevance, his likelihood of remaining relevant as music tastes evolve. They calculated that his catalog would generate more than $70 million over its lifetime, possibly much more if his music remains popular for decades. They paid him $70 million up front, betting they'll make it back, plus profit over 20, 30, or 40 years of ongoing streams and licensing. For Future, $70 million cash in 2022 was more valuable than potentially earning $100 or $150 million spread over 30 years. He could invest that money now, generating returns that might exceed what the catalog would have generated. He could secure his financial future immediately rather than depending on royalty checks that fluctuate based on his ongoing popularity. He could live the lifestyle he wanted without waiting. But here's what's crucial to understand. $70 million wasn't all of Future's wealth. That was just one transaction, just one source of income. He still earns massive money from touring. His shows command $200,000 to $500,000 or more per performance, and he does dozens of shows annually during active touring cycles. That's $10 to $20 million per year just from touring during peak years. He still earns from new music he creates after the catalog sale. Anything released after the transaction belongs to him, not to Influence Media Partners. He still earns from features, commanding $200,000 to $300,000 per verse. If he does 20 features per year, that's $4 to $6 million annually. He still earns from brand partnerships, Reebok deals, product endorsements, sponsored social media posts that reach his millions of followers. He earns from his Freebands label when other artists signed to it have success. Industry estimates put Future's current net worth between $40 million and $60 million after the catalog sale and accounting for his spending and investments. But his total career earnings, the gross amount he's generated before taxes and expenses, likely exceeds $150 million, possibly approaching $200 million when you add album sales before streaming revenue before the catalog sale, touring income across his career, features, publishing, brand deals, and the $70 million catalog sale itself. This is important context because when we discuss Future not helping his brothers, we're not talking about a man with limited resources trying to figure out how to spread a small amount of money across many needs. We're talking about someone who generated enough wealth to change hundreds of lives without significantly impacting his own lifestyle. When you deposit $70 million into your bank account, plus tens of millions more from other sources accumulated over years of success, spending follows. And Future's spending became the stuff of hip-hop legend, the kind of excess that makes for great Instagram content but raises questions about priorities. The most visible purchase was the mansion, and calling it just a mansion doesn't capture the scale. In 2022, around the time of the catalog sale, Future purchased a $20 million estate in Miami. Not Miami proper, we're talking waterfront property in one of Miami's most exclusive neighborhoods. 10 bedrooms, not because he needs 10 bedrooms, but because that's the scale of property you buy when you have $70 million to spend. Multiple swimming pools, private dock for yachts, security systems that cost more than most people's homes with cameras, guards, the works. Ocean views that stretch to the horizon. The kind of property that isn't just a home, it's a statement. $20 million for a house. Let that sink in. That's generational wealth by itself. That's enough to send 50 kids to college. That's enough to start 20 businesses. That's enough to employ 200 people at $50,000 annual salaries for 2 years. But it's one house for one person. The mansion was just the most expensive line item in a spending spree that would make most people's heads spin. The car collection grew to legendary proportions. Multiple Rolls-Royces, each costing $300,000 to $500,000. Bentleys, Lamborghinis running $400,000 to $600,000 each. Ferraris, limited edition supercars that appreciate in value but start at $500,000. Conservative estimates put the value of his car collection at $3 to $5 million, though some reports suggest it could be higher. These aren't investments in the traditional sense. Cars depreciate the moment you drive them off the lot. Yes, some rare models appreciate, but most luxury vehicles lose value. So we're talking $3 to $5 million spent on depreciating assets purchased primarily for image and enjoyment. Private jet charters became the standard mode of travel. No more commercial flights, no more dealing with airports and TSA lines and sitting next to regular people. Private jets cost anywhere from $10,000 for short domestic flights to $30,000 or more for cross-country or international trips. If Future takes 50 private flights per year, not unreasonable for someone constantly touring and traveling for business, that's $500,000 to $1.5 million annually just on air travel. Jewelry represented another massive expenditure. Diamond chains worth hundreds of thousands. Custom watches, not Rolexes from the jewelry store, but custom pieces that cost $300,000, $500,000 more. Rings with stones the size of small pebbles. Grills, custom diamond grills that cost $50,000 to $100,000 just for your mouth. The kind of jewelry you see in music videos isn't costume jewelry or borrowed pieces for the shoot. Future owns it. Estimated value of his jewelry collection, $2 to $4 million, potentially more. Then there's the category of spending that doesn't show up in property records or get documented in Instagram posts. The lifestyle spending that's harder to track but adds up to millions. Cash gifts to women, reportedly substantial. Trips to expensive nightclubs where a single night can cost $50,000 to $100,000 when you're buying bottles, covering tables, taking care of entourages. Shopping sprees at luxury stores. Taking friends and associates on trips, covering their expenses. The kind of spending where $10,000 here, $20,000 there accumulates into millions annually. On-screen graphic appears, Future spending breakdown, estimated 2020 to 2024. Real estate, $20 million plus vehicle collection, $3 million to $5 million jewelry collection, $2 million to $4 million annual lifestyle spending, $5 million to $10 million per year investments, real estate businesses, $10 million plus total estimated spending since catalog sale, $45 million to $60 million. When you make $70 million plus ongoing income of $10 to $20 million annually, this level of spending is sustainable. Future wasn't going broke. His net worth remained substantial. He was living the life his music promised, the life he'd rapped about for over a decade. The mansion, the cars, the jewelry, the women, the luxury. Everything he described in his songs he was now living in reality. But here's where the narrative gets uncomfortable, where the celebration of success runs headfirst into moral complexity. While Future was buying a $20 million mansion, the people he came up with, the people who stood beside him when he was just Nevadius from Kirkwood grinding in anonymous studios, were still in the same neighborhoods, facing the same economic pressures, making the same dangerous choices that Future had escaped. The question became unavoidable, sitting in the room like an elephant everyone could see but nobody wanted to acknowledge. What happens when you make it out but the people you called brothers are left behind? In hip-hop culture, there's a concept that outsiders often don't understand or minimize: the distinction and relationship between blood brothers and street brothers. Blood brothers are your actual family, siblings, cousins, relatives connected by DNA and family trees. Street brothers are the friends who became family through shared experience. The people you grew up with in the same neighborhood, who had your back before anyone knew your name, who shared the struggle when success was just a distant dream. For Future, Both categories of brothers existed, and both had expectations. He has actual siblings, including a biological brother named Taurus, who was deeply connected to his life before fame, who knew him as Nayvadius, not as the superstar Future. And he has street brothers, childhood friends from Kirkwood who played basketball with him, made music together in cheap studios, navigated the same dangerous streets, survived the same environment. The expectation in hip-hop culture, especially when you come from the streets and build your brand on authenticity, is crystal clear. When you make it, you bring your people with you. This isn't considered charity or optional generosity, it's obligation. You give them jobs, you sign them to your label, you invest in their businesses, you make sure they're straight, that they're eating, that they're not struggling while you're thriving. It's not just generosity, it's reciprocity. These people had your back when you had nothing. They supported your dreams when nobody else believed. They put money in your pocket when you were broke. They provided encouragement when success seemed impossible. Now that you have everything, you're supposed to reciprocate that loyalty with material support. This expectation exists across many cultures, not just hip-hop. In immigrant communities, when one person makes it, they send money back home, sponsor relatives to come to America, help everyone eat. In working-class families across races, when one sibling gets a good job or comes into money, they help the whole family. Pay off mom's house, help cousins with college, ensure nobody's struggling. The concept of I got mine, you get yours is seen as individualistic betrayal of collective struggle. But what happens when you don't meet those expectations? What happens when you make $150 million but the people you called brothers are still struggling? Future's early career was filled with these people. Look at his early music videos from the Streets Calling era, the astronaut status era. Childhood friends appear in the backgrounds. Associates get shout-outs in songs. There's a whole crew that seem to be part of the rise, part of the story, part of the dream being realized collectively. Free Bands, his label, seemed positioned to be a vehicle for bringing people up. The name itself, Free Band Gang, implied collective success. Multiple artists eating from the same plate. Young Scooter was signed. Others were affiliated. It seemed like Future was building an empire that would elevate everyone around him. But as Future's success grew exponentially, something changed. The crew visible in public got smaller. The inner circle tightened. The people who'd been around in the Kirkwood days, in the early mixtape days, in the studio sessions before major label deals, many of them weren't visible anymore in the Buckhead Mansion days, the private jet days, the $70 million catalog sale days. Were they cut off intentionally? Did they drift apart naturally as Future's life changed? Did Future try to help but his offers were rejected or squandered? Did some of them have personal issues, addiction, legal troubles, attitude problems that made them unable to adapt to legitimate business? Or did Future simply move on to a new life and new relationships that didn't include the people who knew him before the money? The answer is probably complicated, different for different individuals. Relationships are complex. Success changes dynamics. Not everyone grows at the same pace. Some people can't handle the transition from street life to legitimate business. Some relationships are poisoned by jealousy or entitlement, but the pattern viewed from the outside is clear. Future made hundreds of millions of dollars, and most of the people he came up with, the friends from Kirkwood, the associates from early music days, the day ones who believed in him before everyone else. They didn't share in that wealth in any meaningful, life-changing way. Stories started emerging, whispered in Atlanta streets and discussed quietly in barbershops and studios. Not publicized widely because these weren't famous people with media platforms, but in Zone 6, in Kirkwood, in the neighborhoods Future came from, people talked about how someone reached out to Future's team asking for help starting a legitimate business and never got a response. About how a childhood friend needed $5,000 to avoid eviction and Future's people said no. About how associates who appeared in early videos were now struggling to pay rent, working minimum wage jobs, still hustling in the streets. The contrast was stark and painful. Future's lifestyle, $20 million mansion, private jets, luxury car collection worth millions, versus their ongoing struggle. Minimal legitimate income, street hustles that paid enough to survive but never enough to escape. The same risks that Future had successfully navigated and escaped, they were still living daily with no exit in sight. And when you're in that position, when you see your homeboy who you came up with buying a $20 million mansion while you're still figuring out how to make rent, when you see him posting jewelry worth more than you'll make in a lifetime while you're struggling to buy groceries, the temptation to return to the streets, to the trap, to illegal money becomes overwhelming. Not because you're morally deficient or lack ambition, but because the math is simple. Legitimate minimum wage jobs don't cover basic survival, but trap money does, at least temporarily. Because here's the brutal truth about poverty and street economics that comfortable people don't want to acknowledge. When legitimate opportunity doesn't exist, when society offers you nothing but dead-end minimum wage jobs that don't pay enough to survive, illegitimate opportunity looks less like crime and more like survival strategy. Let's talk about the trap life cycle in detail, because understanding this mechanism is absolutely essential to understanding what happened to Future's brothers and why Future's wealth makes their continued struggle so tragically unnecessary. The trap, that's street slang for the drug game, specifically the street-level distribution of narcotics in urban areas. It's called the trap for a reason. It's literally a trap that's nearly impossible to escape once you're caught in it. Here's how the cycle operates. You grow up in a low-income neighborhood. The schools are underfunded, overcrowded, failing to provide education that leads to college or professional careers. The legitimate jobs available in your neighborhood are service sector minimum wage positions, fast food, retail, manual labor, maybe security guard work if you're lucky. These jobs pay $7.25 to $12 per hour, maybe $15 in better markets. Even working full-time, that's $15,000 to $31,000 annually before taxes. Try supporting yourself on $20,000 per year. Now try supporting a family. Try paying rent that's $800 to $1,200 monthly just for a basic apartment. Try buying food, covering utilities, maybe having a car for transportation, maybe helping your mom with her bills, maybe having kids you need to feed and clothe. The math doesn't work. Legitimate minimum wage work, which is all most low-income neighborhoods offer, quite literally doesn't generate enough income for basic survival. Meanwhile, you see people in your neighborhood making thousands of dollars weekly selling, not millions. Most street dealers aren't getting rich, but they're making $1,000, $2,000, maybe $3,000 per week cash. That's $50,000 to $150,000 annually, far more than any legitimate job available to you would pay. The math becomes devastatingly simple. So you start small. Maybe you sell a little weed, something relatively low risk. Make $500 a week, which is more than you'd make at McDonald's and requires fewer hours. You don't get caught immediately, so you expand. Maybe you move to pills, Percocet, Xanax, substances with high demand. Now you're making $2,000 a week. Still not rich, but sustainable, more than legitimate work ever paid. But here's the trap mechanism. You can't just save that money and transition to legitimate business. Drug money doesn't come with a W-2 form. You can't deposit $50,000 in a bank account without triggering suspicious activity reports. You can't put it in a 401k. You can't get a business loan using drug income as collateral because explaining your income source means confessing to crimes. You can't buy a house with a mortgage because your tax returns show no legitimate income. So the money gets spent in ways that don't build wealth. Cars that get repossessed when you get arrested and can't make payments. Jewelry that gets stolen or seized. Cash that gets spent on daily expenses and lifestyle. Money that evaporates as quickly as it arrives, leaving you with nothing to show for years of risk. And every single day you're in the trap, you're risking catastrophic consequences. Arrest means criminal record, prison time, permanent employment barriers. Federal prosecution means mandatory minimum sentences, 10 years, 20 years, life sentences for substantial quantities. Rivals might rob you, shoot you, kill you over territory or perceived disrespect. Customers might set you up. Police might catch you in a sting operation. Violence is constant, random, unavoidable. The longer you stay in the trap, the more likely one of these outcomes becomes inevitable. It's not a matter of if something terrible happens, it's a matter of when. Every week you survive is borrowed time. Every dollar you make is gambling with years or decades of your life. This was the reality for many of Future's associates after his rise. They didn't have catalog sales waiting for them. They didn't have legitimate business opportunities. They didn't have connections to record labels, brand partnerships, investment opportunities. What they had was the same environment Future came from, the same limited options, the same economic pressures. But Future had escaped. They hadn't. Limited legitimate job opportunities in their neighborhoods meant dead-end work or unemployment. The neighborhood environment normalized trap life. When everyone around you is doing it, when it's how families survive, when it's been the economic foundation of your community for generations, it stops feeling like deviance and starts feeling like necessity, like the only rational response to impossible circumstances. The pressure to provide is real and immediate. If you have family depending on you, if you have kids who need to eat, if you have rent due next week and no paycheck coming, if your mother needs help with medical bills, the trap becomes not just just logical, but urgent. Not moral, not safe, not smart long-term, but logical and necessary in the short term. Without legitimate support, without someone with resources investing in legal business opportunities, without training or mentorship or capital to start something legitimate, the cycle continues generation after generation. And for some of Future's brothers, that cycle would end in federal courtrooms, in prison cells, in deaths that could have been prevented. Young Scooter. That name might not ring bells for casual music fans who don't follow Atlanta hip-hop deeply, but in street circles and among Future fans, Scooter represented something significant. A street brother who almost made it out. Born Kenneth Edward Bailey in 1986 in Atlanta, young Scooter came up in the same circles as Future. Not just the same city, the same actual streets, the same environment, the same pressures. They were associates, friends, collaborators before fame. They had history that predated success. Scooter had his own rap career with real potential. In the early 2000s, he was signed to Future's Free Bands label, which seemed like the perfect setup. Street credibility, connection to a rising star, infrastructure to support a music career. His mixtapes, particularly Street Lottery series, had genuine buzz in Atlanta. Not national mainstream success, but regional respect, street credibility, a foundation that could build into something sustainable. Street Lottery wasn't just a mixtape title, it was a philosophy. The idea that street hustle could transition into legitimate success, that the same energy and skills that succeed in illegal markets could transfer to legal business. Scooter embodied this possibility. His music was authentic, drawn from real experience. The street tales weren't fabricated for marketing. Scooter lived what he rapped about. This authenticity connected with audiences who recognized real versus manufactured. He was known in Atlanta circles as solid, respected, someone with potential to follow Future's trajectory from street rapper to mainstream success. For a moment in the early 2000s, it looked like the script would repeat itself. Scooter would follow Future's path, turn street credibility into commercial success, escape through music. The Free Bands deal suggested Future was bringing his brother along. The mixtapes gaining traction suggested audiences were receptive. The features and collaborations with established artists suggested the industry was paying attention. But then, the music career stalled in that frustrating space between regional success and national breakthrough. Radio programmers didn't fully embrace his sound. Label interest from major companies didn't materialize into substantial offers. The touring stopped generating substantial income. Doing shows for $2,000 to $5,000 might seem like good money until you account for travel costs, paying your team, and the reality that you might only do 10 shows per year. The streaming revenue never reached levels where you could live comfortably without other income. And Scooter found himself in that dangerous middle space, successful enough that returning to regular jobs felt like failure, but not successful enough that music generated sustainable income. Bills kept coming. Lifestyle expectations remained. The money wasn't flowing. What do you do in that position? What happened next is documented in public records, court filings, and media reports that paint a picture of someone whose legitimate opportunities dried up and who allegedly returned to what he knew. In the mid-2000s, according to law enforcement sources, federal investigators began monitoring young Scooter as part of a broader investigation into drug trafficking networks operating in Atlanta. This wasn't local police watching street-level dealing. This was federal agencies, DEA, FBI, U.S. attorneys, using wiretaps, surveillance, informants, the sophisticated tools reserved for serious, large-scale investigations. The details of what federal agents believe Scooter was involved in haven't been fully publicized, but court documents suggest they suspected he was engaged in distribution operations involving significant quantities of controlled substances. Not small-time street dealing, but the kind of operation that federal prosecutors care about. Large quantities, interstate commerce, conspiracy charges that carry mandatory minimum sentences measured in decades. Then came the raid. Federal agents executed a search warrant at a property connected to Scooter. According to sources familiar with the situation, Scooter attempted to flee when agents arrived, a decision that made his legal situation dramatically worse. Attempting to evade federal agents isn't just another charge. It's evidence of consciousness of guilt, something prosecutors emphasize in front of juries. What happened next depends on which account you believe, but the documented outcome is clear. Young Scooter was apprehended, faced serious federal charges, and his life trajectory changed permanently. The music career that had been struggling was now essentially over. Recording albums and touring are difficult when you're navigating federal indictment. The legal battles consume resources that could have funded music. The outcome left Scooter's future uncertain at best, destroyed at worst. Here's the painful question that haunts this story. Could this have been different if Future had invested in Scooter's music career more substantially, if Freebands had provided adequate financial support during the lean years between regional buzz and potential breakthrough, if legitimate business opportunities had been created when music wasn't generating income, would Scooter have needed or chosen to return to street activities? We can't know with certainty. People make their own choices. Free will exists. External circumstances don't eliminate personal responsibility. Scooter made decisions that led to federal investigation and charges, decisions he must bear responsibility for. But the context matters. The pattern is clear. When legitimate opportunity disappears and financial pressure increases exponentially, when you have a lifestyle to maintain and no legal income stream, returning to what you know, even understanding the catastrophic risks, becomes attractive, becomes logical, becomes almost inevitable. Young Scooter's story isn't unique or exceptional. It's representative of what happens to thousands of artists who get record deals but not adequate support, who find minor success but not sustainable income, who have connections to successful artists but not access to their wealth or resources. It's the story of the trap's second act. You escape briefly through music, but when that doesn't pan out, the trap pulls you back, and this time the consequences are worse because you're older, more exposed, more desperate. If Young Scooter represents the story of a street brother who almost made it, Future's actual blood brother, Taurus Wilburn, represents an even more painful failure, not just of friendship or business, but of family obligation. Taurus Wilburn, Future's biological brother, not a friend or associate claiming connection, not someone who grew up in the neighborhood, but actual family, connected by blood, raised in the same household, sharing the same parents, the same struggles that shaped both their lives, the same poverty that motivated both toward different paths. Taurus wasn't in the music industry. He wasn't trying to be a rapper, producer, or industry player. He wasn't asking to be signed to Freebands or demanding a position in Future's team. He was just Future's brother, living in Atlanta, trying to survive like millions of other people in similar circumstances who don't have family members worth $150 million. The arrest happened in 2023. Federal and local law enforcement agencies working in coordination on a drug trafficking investigation that had been ongoing for months executed a search warrant at a location connected to Taurus Wilburn. What they found, according to public court documents, media reports, and law enforcement statements, was staggering in quantity and deadly in substance. 21 kilograms of fentanyl. Let's pause on that number because most people don't have context for what 21 kilograms represents. That's not personal use quantities. That's not even small-time dealing quantities. That's 46 pounds of one of the deadliest substances currently killing Americans at epidemic rates. Fentanyl, the synthetic opioid 50 times more potent than heroin, 100 times more potent than morphine, the drug that killed Prince, Mac Miller, Tom Petty, and tens of thousands of Americans annually. 21 kilograms represents hundreds of thousands of individual doses, enough to supply a significant distribution network across multiple states, the kind of quantity that indicates serious organization, substantial capital, connections to suppliers, and distribution chains. The kind of quantity that federal prosecutors dream about because it makes their cases virtually unwinnable for defendants. The charges were federal, filed in federal court by U.S. attorneys, which means this wasn't going through state court where judges might show leniency or where plea deals might result in lighter sentences. Federal drug charges, especially for fentanyl in these quantities, carry mandatory minimum sentences that eliminate judicial discretion. The sentencing guidelines for 21 kilograms of fentanyl start at decades and can easily result in life sentences. We're not talking about a possibility of probation or a few years. We're talking about Taurus, Future's brother, potentially spending the rest of his life in federal prison, dying in a prison cell, never experiencing freedom again, his entire future reduced to concrete walls and barbed wire. Taurus's arrest generated some media coverage because of the Future connection. Entertainment news outlets reported it. Hip-hop blogs covered it. Social media discussed it briefly, but it wasn't a massive scandal that dominated headlines for weeks. Future's publicity team stayed completely silent. No public statements. No press releases, no interviews addressing his brother's situation. The story faded from mainstream attention within days, replaced by newer celebrity gossip and industry news. But the implications of this arrest are profound and cannot be overstated. This isn't a distant relative. This isn't someone claiming family connection for attention. This is Future's actual brother, his blood, someone who shared his childhood, his struggles, his family history, and that brother was allegedly involved in distributing one of the deadliest substances in America in quantities that suggest large-scale operations, facing charges that will likely result in him spending the rest of his life in federal prison. The question screams for an answer, echoing in the space between Future's $20 million mansion and Taurus's prison cell. How does the brother of a man worth tens of millions of dollars, a man who made $70 million from a single catalog sale, a man who generates millions annually from touring and features, end up in a position where distributing 21 kilograms of fentanyl seems like a viable life choice? Let's be crystal clear about what we're not saying. We're not saying Taurus is blameless or that he's a victim without agency. We're not saying that Future is legally responsible for his brother's choices or that wealthy people must financially support every decision their relatives make. We're not saying that money solves all problems or that giving Taurus money would have automatically resulted in good decisions. We're not absolving Taurus of responsibility for allegedly engaging in activity that contributes to the opioid epidemic killing tens of thousands annually. But we are saying this: if Future had invested meaningfully in his brother's legitimate future, whether through business opportunities, employment, education, mentorship, capital for legitimate entrepreneurship, whatever form of support was appropriate and accepted, would Taurus have been in a position where trafficking fentanyl seemed necessary, attractive, or even possible? Could this have been prevented? If legitimate income streams existed through employment in Future's various business entities, free bands, his real estate ventures, his merchandise operations, his tour management, if mentorship existed, teaching business skills, financial literacy, how to transition from street thinking to legitimate entrepreneurship, if financial support was available when needed, preventing the desperate situations that push people toward desperate actions. If someone said, here's $100,000 to start a legitimate business with proper guidance and accountability, instead of Taurus needing to find money through means that would land him in federal prison. Connect this back to Future's empire. Future has generated over $150 million in career earnings. He bought a $20 million mansion. He owns a luxury car collection worth millions. He travels exclusively by private jet. He spends millions annually on lifestyle and jewelry. Meanwhile, his actual brother was allegedly trafficking enough fentanyl to earn a life sentence, risking everything in the deadliest corner of illegal markets. The contrast isn't just painful, it's damning. Not legally damning for Future, who bears no legal responsibility for his adult brother's choices, but morally damning in terms of what it says about priorities, family obligation, and the responsibilities that come with extraordinary wealth generated from streets that claimed his brother. The tragedy is that it was preventable, not guaranteed to be prevented. Taurus had free will, and we don't know what offers were made and rejected, but preventable in the sense that resources existed that could have created alternatives, provided options, built legitimate paths that didn't require fentanyl distribution. Now we arrive at the uncomfortable moral question at the absolute center of this entire investigation. If you make wealth from the streets, from the culture, from the authenticity of your connection to communities still struggling, do you owe your crew? This question generates passionate disagreement because different cultural frameworks provide radically different answers. From the street culture perspective, the answer is absolutely, unquestionably yes. The code is not ambiguous. You don't leave your people behind. When you eat, your people eat. When you make it, you bring your crew with you. Loyalty isn't optional. It's the fundamental value that binds communities together in circumstances where institutional support doesn't exist. If you came up together, struggled together, survived together, then you succeed together or the success is hollow. This isn't just hip-hop culture, this is human culture across many communities that face systemic exclusion from prosperity. In immigrant families, when one person makes it to America and succeeds, they send money home, sponsor relatives to immigrate, ensure the whole extended family benefits. In working-class communities across races, when one sibling gets a high-paying job, they help the whole family. Pay off mom's house, help cousins with college, make sure nobody's in crisis. The concept of I got mine, you get yours is seen as individualistic betrayal of collective struggle. The street version is even more intense because the struggle was shared directly. These weren't just people who grew up in the same general circumstances. These were your actual crew, the people who had your back in dangerous situations, who supported your dreams when nobody else believed, who put money in your pockets when you were broke, who provided protection and brotherhood when the world was hostile. That creates obligations that go beyond normal family ties. From the business perspective, the answer is more complicated. Future doesn't owe anyone anything legally. He earned his money through his own talent, his own work, his own creativity, his own strategic decisions. That wealth is his to do with as he pleases. Expecting him to financially support everyone he knew growing up isn't realistic or fair. He has his own immediate family to support, multiple children from different relationships, their mothers, his own living expenses. He has his own financial obligations and goals. Additionally, simply giving money to people doesn't automatically help them. If someone lacks financial literacy, if they have unresolved addiction issues, if they're not mentally prepared to transition from street life to legitimate business, if they don't have the discipline or skills to manage resources, giving them large sums might make things worse, rather than better. Money doesn't solve every problem. Sometimes it creates new ones. From a practical standpoint, where do you draw the line? If Future has 20 close associates from his come-up, does he need to support all of them indefinitely? What about 50 people who claim connection? What about extended family, childhood friends, associates of associates, people from the neighborhood who say they had his back? The circle expands quickly. At some point, even extraordinary wealth can't support unlimited people without running out. But here's where these business perspectives, while technically accurate, miss something fundamental about Future's specific situation. Future built his entire brand, his entire image, his entire career on authenticity, on being real, on representing where he came from, on staying connected to the streets that raised him. His music is filled with references to loyalty, to his crew, to having his people's backs. He raps about this constantly, makes it central to his public persona. You can't build a career on street credibility, on being loyal, on never forgetting where you came from, and then abandon those same people and principles when you actually have resources to demonstrate that loyalty materially. That's not business pragmatism. That's hypocrisy. That's using street culture to make millions, then discarding the obligations that culture demands once the money arrives. Industry culture complicates this further. Rappers face expectations that other successful people don't face. If a tech entrepreneur from a poor background becomes a billionaire, nobody expects them to employ all their childhood friends or support their entire neighborhood. Society accepts that they earned their wealth individually and can spend it however they choose. But if a rapper does the same thing, the expectations are radically different because hip-hop culture emphasizes keeping it real, staying loyal, not forgetting where you came from. These aren't just marketing slogans. They're core values that audiences expect artists to demonstrate through actions, not just lyrics. When a rapper gets wealthy and abandons their crew, it's seen as fundamentally violating the culture that enabled their success. So did Future fail his brothers? Let's examine the evidence systematically. We have Young Scooter, signed to Future's own label, whose music career wasn't adequately supported, whose financial needs during lean periods weren't met, and who allegedly returned to street activities when music income dried up and faced serious federal charges as a result. We have Taurus Wilburn, Future's actual biological brother, facing potential life in prison for drug trafficking involving deadly quantities of fentanyl while Future lives in a $20 million mansion and travels by private jet. We have numerous other associates whose names aren't public but whose stories follow similar patterns. Initial connection to Future during his rise, hopes of being brought along into success, eventual realization that meaningful help isn't coming, return to street activities that lead to arrest, injury, or death. We have the contrast between Future's public persona and his apparent private actions. His music is filled with references to loyalty, to taking care of his people, to never forgetting where he came from. But the evidence suggests that rhetoric didn't translate into substantial material support for the people he came up with. We have the resources that existed versus the outcomes that occurred. Future had tens of millions available that could have created legitimate opportunities, provided capital for businesses, employed people in his various ventures, prevented the desperate circumstances that push people toward illegal activity. Those resources existed, but the outcomes suggest they weren't deployed to prevent his brother's tragic situations. The counter-arguments deserve consideration because we're not omniscient. Maybe Future tried to help and his offers were rejected by people who weren't ready to leave street life. Maybe he gave money that was wasted, stolen, or squandered by people with addiction or financial mismanagement issues. Maybe some of his associates had problems that money couldn't solve. Mental health issues, addiction, criminal thinking that was too deeply ingrained to change. Maybe he's been helping privately in ways that aren't public and don't generate press releases. These are all genuinely possible. We don't have access to Future's bank statements showing every payment he's made. We don't know about private conversations where help was offered and refused. We can't definitively prove that substantial support wasn't provided behind the scenes, but the public evidence suggests strongly that if Future did help substantially, it wasn't nearly enough to prevent multiple people in his immediate circle from returning to dangerous street life and facing catastrophic consequences. The outcomes speak loudly. His brother faces life in prison, his former label mate faced serious federal charges, associates from his early career are by most accounts still struggling in the streets. That's not just unfortunate coincidence. That's a pattern that suggests systemic failure to use extraordinary resources to prevent foreseeable tragedy. Fictionalized composite interview quote appears on screen, representing perspectives gathered from people in similar situations across Atlanta's music scene. He always said he'd take care of us when he made it big. Every time we were in the studio early on, every time we hung out and talked about dreams, he promised we'd all eat together. We believed him because he seemed genuine. We supported his music before anybody knew his name, promoted his shows, defended him when people doubted. And when he got that catalog money, when he bought that $20 million mansion, when we saw him on Instagram with private jets and unlimited jewelry, we were still in the same project, still dealing with the same problems, still trying to figure out how to survive. We reached out, some people got responses, some didn't, but nobody got life-changing help, nobody got real opportunity. We never saw it. And now some of our friends are dead or facing life in prison while he's on vacation in Dubai. That loyalty he rapped about, it was just lyrics. The viewpoints remain divided and likely will remain divided because this touches fundamental disagreements about individual versus collective responsibility. Business-minded people argue that Future earned his money and bears no obligation to support adults who should take responsibility for their own choices. Street-minded people argue that obligation to your crew is sacred, that forgetting where you came from when you have resources to help is the ultimate betrayal, unforgivable in communities where loyalty is everything. Both perspectives contain merit and truth, but the fact remains stark and unavoidable. Future generated over $150 million in career earnings. His blood brother faces life in prison for drug trafficking. His friend and label mate faced serious federal charges. The people he came up with are, by nearly all accounts, still struggling in the same circumstances Future escaped. That's not just a business decision based on rational evaluation of options. That's a choice about priorities, about values, about what matters when extraordinary wealth meets family obligation. And that choice has consequences measured in prison sentences, broken families, and lives that could have gone differently. Let's break down exactly how Future's wealth engine operates, because understanding the scale of his resources and income streams makes the decision not to substantially help his brothers even more striking and difficult to rationalize. First, streaming revenue before the catalog sale represented a massive income source, with over 20 billion streams on Spotify alone, plus similar enormous numbers across Apple Music, YouTube Music, Amazon Music, and other platforms. We're discussing tens of millions in gross revenue. Current industry estimates suggest major artists earn approximately $3,000 to $5,000 per million streams after all intermediary splits. Future's 20 billion Spotify streams translate to roughly $60 to $100 million in gross streaming revenue over his career before the catalog sale, of which Future's actual take depends on his specific label deals, his master ownership percentage, and his publishing splits. The catalog sale in 2022 represented $70 million delivered in a single transaction. But that was capturing the future earning potential of already created music. Future can still create new music post-sale and profit entirely from that new work, since the sale only covered his catalog up to that point. Touring represents absolutely massive annual income during active years. A Future concert sells out venues ranging from theaters holding 3,000 people to arenas holding 15,000 to 20,000. Ticket prices span $50 for cheap seats to $300 to $500 for VIP sections and meet and greets. After paying venue costs, production expenses, crew salaries, and other overhead, headlining artists typically keep 30 to 50% of gross revenue. For major tours hitting 30 to 50 cities, this generates $10 to $20 million in profit per tour cycle. Future does these tours regularly during peak activity years. Feature verses represent another substantial stream. When other artists want Future on their song, they pay premium rates that reflect his commercial impact and cultural relevance. Multiple industry sources report Future's feature rate reached $200,000 to $300,000 per verse at his peak. If he does 20 to 30 features annually, which is conservative given his collaborative frequency, that generates $4 to $9 million annually from features alone. Brand partnerships and endorsements add millions that often aren't fully disclosed publicly. His Reebok deal reportedly paid millions. Product placements in music videos generate fees. Sponsored social media posts command $50,000 to $150,000 per post for someone with his follower count and engagement. These streams might contribute $3 to $5 million annually during peak years. Real estate investments multiply wealth through appreciation and rental income. Property values in Miami, Atlanta, and other markets where Future owns property have increased substantially over the past decade. If he purchased strategically in growing markets, the appreciation alone could represent $5 to $10 million in increased net worth without any active management. His Free Bands label generates income from signed artist music, from production work, from publishing administration. While not as massively successful as some imprints, it still contributes steady revenue. On-screen graphic appears, Future's peak annual income breakdown, estimated. Streaming royalties, pre-catalog sale, $5 million to $10 million. Touring profits, $10 million to $20 million. Feature verse fees, $4 million to $9 million. Brand deals and endorsements, $3 million to $5 million. Label side production income, $1 million to $3 million. Real estate appreciation, $2 million to $5 million. Estimated total annual income during peak years, $25 million to $52 million. Career total gross earnings estimate, $150 million to $200 million. Catalog sale, 2022, $70 million additional. Now let's contrast this with street economics to understand the impossibly large gap. A successful street-level dealer in Atlanta, someone moving substantial product and avoiding the bottom rungs, might clear $50,000 to $100,000 annually after product costs, paying workers below them and covering risks. That's actually on the higher end. Most dealers make far less, many barely making sustainable income. That income comes with catastrophic risks, federal prosecution carrying mandatory 10 to 20-year minimums for substantial quantities, life sentences for career criminals or fentanyl-related charges, violence from competitors that can result in injury or death, robbery by customers or rivals, no health care, no retirement planning, no benefits, money that can't be legally invested, saved in banks, or used for legitimate purchases without raising suspicion, constant stress, paranoia, inability to sleep peacefully knowing today might be the day you get arrested or killed. Meanwhile, Future at his peak earns $30 to $50 million annually with virtually zero physical risk, complete legal protection, full ability to invest and grow wealth legitimately through traditional financial instruments, and generational wealth that will support his descendants for multiple generations. The risk-adjusted comparison isn't even close. Future makes 500 to 1,000 times what a successful dealer makes annually, with perhaps 1% of the risk, while enjoying complete legal protection and unlimited growth potential. Here's the part that makes this analysis painful. Future could have invested just $5 million, less than 4% of his catalog sale, less than 15% of a single peak year's income, and completely transformed the life trajectories of 10 to 20 people permanently. Think about what $5 million strategically deployed could accomplish. Give Taurus, his brother, $200,000 invested not as a no-strings gift but as capital for a legitimate business with proper guidance, training, and accountability. A car wash generates steady cash flow and employs people. A recording studio serves artists and builds equity. Real estate investment properties generate passive rental income and appreciate. With $200,000 in proper mentorship, Taurus could have built sustainable, legitimate income that eliminates any need or temptation to traffic drugs. For young Scooter and other artists on Free Bands, provide genuine financial support beyond just a record contract. Living expenses covered during development years, $60,000 annually would cover rent, food, basic lifestyle while they focus entirely on music. Studio time fully funded rather than artists paying hourly rates. Marketing budgets adequate to actually promote releases rather than expecting artists to drive all promotion. manager and lawyer fees covered so they have professional representation. Make the music career actually viable instead of just a contract that creates obligations while providing insufficient support. For 10 to 15 childhood friends and associates, create legitimate employment opportunities within Future's business empire. He runs a record label that needs staff, security, personnel paid $50,000 to $70,000 annually, administrative assistants managing logistics, social media managers creating content, merchandise coordinators handling product, tour support staff for productions, studio staff engineering sessions. These are real jobs with salaries, health insurance, retirement contributions, and legitimate paths forward instead of street hustling. Allocate $2 million into a properly structured trust, invested conservatively in index funds generating 3 to 5% annual returns. That produces $60,000 to $100,000 annually that can be distributed for emergencies, education support, medical bills, small business startup capital, down payments on homes. Managed professionally with accountability, this creates perpetual support without depleting principal. Partner with business consultants or programs to provide formal training in entrepreneurship, financial literacy, business management. Many people from street backgrounds have entrepreneurial instincts honed through hustling. Those skills transfer to legitimate business with proper training and guidance. A 6-month intensive program costs $50,000 to $100,000 but could prevent millions in earnings lost to incarceration. Leverage industry connections for job placement. A phone call or email from Future opens doors that remain closed to regular applicants. Connect people to opportunities in entertainment, hospitality, real estate, sales, legitimate industries where work ethic and people skills translate to success. For comparison, examine artists who did substantially support their crews and communities. Jay-Z employed numerous friends from Marcy Projects in various roles at Roc Nation, provided startup capital for their businesses including restaurants and clothing lines, created opportunities that genuinely changed lives. Those friends now have legitimate careers, own businesses, built wealth legally. Nipsey Hussle invested millions back into his Crenshaw neighborhood, buying property, building businesses that employed locals, creating economic opportunity where it didn't exist. His model of economic empowerment is still cited as the gold standard for how successful artists should engage their communities. Nipsey's friends and associates got real opportunities, real jobs, real chances. Drake employed numerous Toronto friends in OVO operations, maintained those relationships as his wealth exploded into hundreds of millions. Demonstrated that commercial success doesn't require abandoning the people who supported you initially. These artists prove it's possible. You can achieve massive commercial success and bring people with you. It requires intentionality, proper structure, accountability systems, and genuine commitment, but it's absolutely achievable and has been demonstrated repeatedly. The question that haunts Future's story was the lack of visible, substantial support for his brothers purely business pragmatism, or was it something uglier? Betrayal of the loyalty he built his brand upon. Business logic argues Future earned his money and bears no obligation to anyone. Every dollar he made came from his talent, his work ethic, his strategic decisions. That wealth is his to allocate as he determines best. Expecting him to support everyone from his past isn't realistic or fair. But betrayal logic argues that when you build your entire career on authenticity, on loyalty, on representing your roots, then you abandon the people you came up with when you finally have resources to help. That violates the fundamental code you claim to live by. Your success was built partially on their support, their belief, their labor in promoting you. When success arrives, reciprocity isn't optional, it's owed. The truth likely exists somewhere between these extremes, complicated by details we'll never access, but the documented outcomes speak with devastating clarity. Future generated over $150 million. His brother will likely die in federal prison. His friend faced career-destroying federal charges. Associates from his early years remain in circumstances Future escaped. Whatever Future's intentions, the results are documented, public, and tragic. So let's recap this entire investigation and synthesize what we've learned. The rise, Future emerged from Zone 6 Atlanta, grinding through years of struggle before breaking through with Tony Montana and subsequent hits that defined a sonic generation. He built a catalog eventually worth $70 million. He generated over $150 million in total career earnings through music, touring, features, and strategic business decisions. He became one of hip-hop's most consistent commercial forces. The fortune, between the catalog sale, accumulated touring income, streaming revenue, feature fees, and investments, Future built wealth most people cannot conceptualize. Tens of millions in liquid assets, substantial real estate portfolio, income streams generating millions annually without requiring new creative output. The spending, $20 million Miami mansion, luxury car collection worth millions, private jet charters as standard transportation, million-dollar jewelry collection, lifestyle spending of millions annually, living exactly the dream his music projected. The abandonment. While Future lived in escalating luxury, people who came up with him remained in identical circumstances. Future had escaped. His actual brother facing life in federal prison for fentanyl trafficking. His former label mate facing serious federal charges. Childhood friends and associates still hustling in streets, still risking everything, still trapped. The trap. Without legitimate opportunity, without financial support, without investment in their futures from someone with resources to provide it, these people returned to what they knew. Street economics with high risk, low reward, and inevitable catastrophic consequences. Some arrested, some facing decades in prison, some dead, all preventable with strategic resource deployment. The arrest, 21 kilograms of fentanyl, federal charges carrying potential life sentence. Future's brother reduced to a defendant facing death in prison, while Future owns $20 million mansion. The bigger picture extends beyond Future's individual story. This is about the hip-hop business ecosystem where many rise individually, but most are collectively left behind, where one person's success becomes generational wealth while their associates from identical starting points end up with generational incarceration, where the culture celebrates individual success stories while ignoring the collective tragedy of everyone else who didn't make it, who got left behind, whose stories end in courtrooms instead of recording studios. The industry celebrates when a rapper sells their catalog for $70 million. Media writes stories about business genius, about wealth accumulation, about success. But nobody asks what happened to the 20 people who helped them get there, who believed in them before anyone else, who supported their dreams when failure seemed more likely than success. Nobody investigates where those people are now, whether they shared in the wealth, whether the success that was built collectively was distributed equitably. This creates a system where success is individualized but struggle remains collective. The successful artist benefits from culture, authenticity, and street credibility provided by association with people still in dangerous circumstances. But when it's time to share wealth, suddenly it becomes, I made it on my own through my own talent. The community that provided the foundation gets discarded once it's no longer useful for credibility marketing. The lessons for upcoming artists are clear and urgent. First, wealth is complex. Making money and keeping money are radically different skills requiring different knowledge. Future kept his wealth through smart investments, master ownership, strategic business decisions. But wealth also creates moral obligations if you claim to value loyalty and community. You can't have it both ways. Either you're loyal or you're not, and actions speak infinitely louder than lyrics. Second, loyalty has costs. You cannot rap about loyalty, build your brand on authenticity, claim to represent your hood, and then abandon those people when you actually have resources to demonstrate that loyalty materially. Either you're loyal or you're not. The streets remember which one you choose, and that memory outlasts temporary commercial success. Third, responsibility matters fundamentally. If you make hundreds of millions while your actual brother faces life in prison for drug trafficking, you need to ask yourself hard questions about whether you could have prevented that outcome through different choices about resource allocation and priorities. For viewers watching this, consider, what will you do if you make it? Who will you bring with you? Will you remember where you came from with actions, not just words? Or will you adopt the I got mine mentality once success arrives? These aren't hypothetical questions for someone else to answer. These are choices that define character, that determine whether your success becomes a ladder lifting others or just a personal achievement leaving everyone else exactly where they started. He made hundreds of millions. His boys still hustle. The money changed his life. It didn't change theirs. That's the truth behind the money, stripped of marketing and mythology. Future's story continues. He'll keep making music, keep accumulating wealth, keep living the lifestyle his success affords. The mansion will remain his home. The car collection will grow. The bank account will increase. He'll make more albums, do more tours, secure more business deals. His commercial success will likely continue because he's genuinely talented and understands his audience. But Taurus Wilburn will spend decades in federal prison, quite possibly the rest of his life dying behind bars. Young Scooter's music career is derailed, his potential unfulfilled, his life trajectory permanently altered. The childhood friends and associates who believed they'd share in the success are still in zone 6, still hustling, still risking everything, still trapped in circumstances Future escaped but didn't help them escape. The catalog sold for $70 million, but the cost of that success, measured in broken relationships, abandoned brothers, squandered opportunities to lift others, families destroyed by preventable tragedy, might be higher than any dollar amount can calculate. This isn't about vilifying Future. He's not a villain in a simple morality tale. He's a successful artist who made strategic business decisions and accumulated massive wealth through extraordinary talent and relentless work ethic. That's genuinely admirable from a business perspective. But it's also not about lionizing him or ignoring difficult questions. Success doesn't erase moral complexity. Wealth doesn't eliminate responsibility. Making it doesn't mean you fulfilled all obligations, especially obligations you yourself claimed were sacred through the lyrics that built your career. The truth, as it almost always is deeply complicated. Future made hundreds of millions. Some people he came up with are still suffering in objectively preventable ways. Both statements are simultaneously true. The connection between these facts, whether Future's success could have prevented their struggles through different choices, whether he tried and failed, whether he chose not to help, whether circumstances were more complex than they appear from outside. That's what we've investigated throughout this documentary. The evidence strongly suggests that at minimum, substantially more could have been done. That $5 to $10 million invested strategically in the people Future came up with could have changed multiple life trajectories permanently. That employment opportunities existed within his business empire. That mentorship and training programs were affordable. That the resources to prevent tragedy existed but apparently weren't deployed sufficiently. Whether deploying those resources was Future's responsibility is a question every viewer will answer differently based on their values about individual versus collective obligation. But the fact that prevention was possible, affordable, and apparently didn't happen is undeniable and documented. The final question we leave you with, the one that extends beyond Future's specific situation to anyone who dreams of success. In the pursuit of wealth and achievement, what do we owe to the people who supported us before we made it? Is loyalty just a powerful lyric that sells albums, or is it an obligation backed by concrete actions and resource allocation? Future's answer, communicated through his actions rather than his words, seems clear to anyone examining the evidence. The people who stood by him when he had nothing are still grinding, still risking everything, still trapped in circumstances he escaped but apparently chose not to help them escape. The money changed his life completely and permanently. It didn't change theirs at all. That's the truth behind the money, uncomfortable and tragic as it is.